because you have a human brain. You immediately picked up on the fact that, oh, well, she's saying that she's happy, but there's something there. She might be happy for the most part, but there's something going on, right? So that's kind of I sometimes tell my clients you can use AI as your analyst or as your assistant, but not as your antenna, right? So just being alert and understanding the tone and understanding what's not being said is something that I think stays with the humans. And that's important to teams, to organizations, to culture, and to psychological safety. And the list goes on.
I fascinates me. So I have two follow-up questions. So one is, how do I get better? How can I train myself to be a good global listener? And
Uh-huh.
then also, how are you actually helping leaders to protect and even amplify that skill, especially when everything around them is optimized for speed and data?
Yeah. I think allowing the time, and it sounds too simple on the one hand, or it sounds too impossible in the fast paced world that we live in, especially in corporate lives or leadership lives, as you say. But time definitely is a factor. But there is actually a good checklist or cheat sheet, if you will. The first thing I always tell people is lead with curiosity. Just show up. And sometimes it doesn't come naturally, but it is a learned skill. So you can fake it till you become it, right? So you can say, I'm going to go talk to Val and I'm going to be curious. Now, that sounds a little bit mechanic and maybe not too emotional or maybe not too genuine. But if you actually intentionally, genuinely mean it, you can show up to a meeting and say, I'm going to lead with curiosity. So when you tell me you live in New York, I will say, what's that like? And then human beings, we love stories. We are wired to be empathetic to other humans and their emotions. So once you maybe force yourself, and I know that's not a great word, but I'm not going to sweeten it for you. Once you force yourself into it by telling yourself, I'm going to be curious and I'm going to ask open, powerful questions, then you kind of already find yourself in it oftentimes. So what does it mean? So first curiosity, then open powerful questions. Open questions are ones that don't have an answer of yes or no, right? So they usually start with the three W's. So what, where, when, why. And then also we have how. Okay, so four W's and how. So those are open questions, as opposed to asking you, do you live in New York? Yes. Okay, well, then the conversation's over. I can ask you, where do you live? What's that like? How do you like it? So then more and more the stories come out, and then I can ask more questions. And so a relationship is built, a mutual trust is built from that. And then, of course, the other thing is there's a long list, and I won't get into it all. But the other thing is we need to minimize distractions. And guess what? The biggest distraction is, which it feels ironic saying this on an AI related podcast, but or conversation at least. It's our cell phones and it's all of our devices. It's all of our. We were talking about it with my family the other day that in our kitchen we talk and sometimes Google comes up because we have a Google Home and Google comes up and says, "What's that now?" or "The weather in this location tomorrow is this," because it's listening. Sometimes it says funny things, but it's always listening, right? So it's a distraction. Even when you actually don't proactively look at the distraction, it can be a distraction. So really allowing that time, the space, and then leading with curiosity and open, powerful questions.
I feel like my whole life is a constant distraction. Before it's my personal interests, such as this podcast, it's like a distraction of a distraction. It's actually relatively easy to get distracted when you already are surrounded by distractions.
So I say I'm a big believer in practice in general, right? So if you want to be amazing at piano, then you need to practice every day. And guess what? At first, you're not going to sound good. And also, it's not going to be very fun. And also, it's not going to seem very natural. And so a lot of people give up at that stage, understandably so, because there's big friction, there's big frustration, and then comes a tipping point where you're feeling, okay, well, I'm getting the hang of it. Actually, it's not too bad. Okay, so then you stick with it, and then at some point, you actually get to a point where you're an expert or you're in that flow state, and it just feels natural, right? Even though you're practicing, it has become a habit. So the learning curve is kind of like there's ups and downs and ups and downs, and then after that, hopefully, it just kind of in a linear way goes up or maybe even exponentially. I think recognizing that is really important. So in anything, including in presence. So to practice presence, you have to put yourself through some, and I know this word sometimes is triggering, but through some suffering, to be honest. Right now, and I ask my clients and coaching clients particularly what feels natural to them, right? I wouldn't necessarily tell them, here is what you need to do. And so they identify those things. But they're not comfortable and they're not comfortable things. And I can tell you that my clients don't, I think in the big picture, and I hope in the big picture they like me. But when we're discussing this, they don't like me. They don't like this. They're not excited about it. But, is it putting your phone, outside of the room when you're eating dinner with your family? Some people prefer that. And some people think that it would be a nice to have. Some people maybe not. But if you have said that that's something that's a nice to have, guess what? You have to force yourself to put, and there are no exceptions. I don't care about an emergency or a falsely, urgent email from work or whatever it might be. So just maybe finding, or if you have to meditate, if you're saying, I'm going to meditate every morning, for 5 minutes and I'm not going to be distracted. It's like, okay, so then what's a good space? What's a good environment? What are some good conditions that you can think about that can make you do that? So, realistically ambitious, uncomfortable goals you set for yourself and you practice them. And at some point, it kind of becomes a habit and it's not that hard anymore. But the only other thing I would say, and relatedly but separately, is when you're in flow, you are, and this has been scientifically studied, of course, you are less likely to be and to want to be distracted. So, and flow graph, if we were to go into the science of it, is enough skill and enough challenge. If you have too much challenge, not enough skill, then you're in panic zone because it's too hard for you. You're panicking. You'll be distracted. You won't be in flow. If you have too much skill, not enough challenge, that's boredom zone. You are too skilled and it's not challenging enough for you. You're kind of bored. You'll be distracted. You'll be looking at your phone. The flow state is the perfect optimum place between skill and challenge, right? So if it's something that you're skilled at and that's a little bit challenging for you, like think, basketball for NBA players or something like that, right? They're obviously very skilled, but it's also challenging if they're playing against a team who also is very good, right? They're in flow state. They're not thinking as they're shooting the basketball, oh, let me just look at my phone really quick. Maybe there's something on Instagram, right? They're kind of in the moment. So putting yourself into situations, not saying, become a professional basketball player, but I do work with my clients on what their flow state is and then trying to find situations or find the context where they can increase the amount of time they spend in their flow state, just so that they're not inclined to even want to become distracted.
The flow state. I love it. You often describe your practice as sitting at the intersection of AI driven insight and deeply human work. And coaching is by nature intimate because it's built on trust and intuition and presence. So, how do you bring technology and AI in particular into that space without losing its soul? So can you give us a glimpse of what, for example, AI augmented coaching actually looks like in practice? And how do you balance metrics and meeting and dashboards and a dialogue?
So it's a really good question. I do believe that trust and level three listening, which we just talked about, which obviously is very important in coaching when you're the coach, don't require and don't merit AI tools. I'll just go out there and say that, right? Everything else, maybe I could say 50% of the work, really, just in terms of time spent, I have pretty much automated. So all of the tools of my business, well, I don't have all my tools automated, but most of the tools that I use regularly in my business. So some of the more mundane admin stuff like scheduling, for example, or invoicing or um, or if I'm to write some content, for example, I write all of my content, but then it's structured, it is edited, it is formatted by my AI assistants or AI tools. I schedule my social media posts. And so there's a lot of automation basically that I use for my business, that whether it be lead generation or actually servicing my clients. In my one-to-one coaching sessions, which I have a lot of them, a lot of clients, I rarely bring an AI assistant or AI note taker into the session just because of the confidentiality of it. And also somehow I think people find, unless they ask me for it, sometimes my clients actually bring their note takers, but somehow people feel a bit creeped out, to be honest. And I understand because it's an environment of trust. And, sometimes I'm no therapist, but sometimes, we talk about deep stuff and sometimes people really express their feelings or they're crying in my sessions and stuff like that. So I think they just want to feel that psychological safety. And when there's an AI assistant there taking notes or whatever they're doing, I think it kind of maybe gets in the way of that. My group sessions, my workshops, my trainings have an element of AI, and I will often then also get AI to diagnose certain things or to derive insights or data from insights or conclusions from data. Like, I'll give you an example. They ask me to do this, by the way. Of course, I always take permission, but I worked with a team. So, team coaching, a team of 11 people, and there were some power dynamics. This is a recent thing. So they said, will I also give them it was coaching, it was a bit of training. Will I also give them my sort of observations? And so I did a bit of sentiment analysis and I did a bit of diagnosis. And some people in all of the meetings that we had talk the most, others talk the least. But when you talk to them separately, the ones who are talking the least feel like they're being overpowered. And so there you go, power dynamic, right? So if you're the coach and the facilitator, you kind of sense this anyway, but then looking at the data, it's really helpful. Your AI assistant says, Jane talked 5% of the time, but John talked 55% of the time in an 11-person meeting. And guess what? It was both of their projects that was being presented. It's the diagnosis and the data insights and meaning that can be derived from them that AI helps me with in my coaching, consulting, training business.
I love that. And can you tell us more about the Lego piece? So you're a licensed Lego series play facilitator. It uses on creativity with executives who live in spreadsheets. So
Yes.
what happens when they step away from the screens and
Yeah.
start thinking with their hands again? And do you see this tactile creativity as a kind of antidote to digital overwhelm, or perhaps as a bridge that helps leaders relate to technology in more imaginative and less fearful ways?
Yeah. So talk about flow state. This is one thing that I see over and over and over again, not just Lego, which I'll talk about in a second, but whenever I put together or I observe others put together a playful leadership training or workshop environment where they are stepping away from their digital tools and spreadsheets and they're playing, but it's serious at the same time. They find themselves in that flow state where they lose sense of time and they don't want to look at their phones and see their messages and things like that. So absolutely, it's a great tool for a connection and it's a great tool to put people into a space where they're really thinking deeply and it's embodied work. So what it is, taking a step back for your viewers or listeners who are not familiar, Lego series play is exactly what it sounds like. So you play with Legos, but it is serious. So it's a tool that often is used in business contexts, but also can be used in school contexts, and different kind of groups of people can come together to play with Lego to then derive insights from it. So that's what we do. Is there's a methodology to it. That's the certification that I have. There's methodology to it. So you get people to little by little work with Legos to represent certain things. You might have a theme, let's say that, it's psychological safety, or we did one actually about their annual planning. So strategy and planning, business planning recently with a company. And so it can be about anything really, but you express it first individually and then as a group with Legos as you build with your hands what that strategy might look like or what psychological safety as part of our culture might look like. So your question was, how does it then connect to AI? Or it's very analog for sure. It connects us to our primitive roots, if you will, and people do think and create with their hands. So it's really important that it's very hands on. But we do also, again, in this day and age, connect it to AI. So you can take that embodied experience, right? Take it back. The team that worked with me on creating their business plan and their annual plan, they actually took all of that strategy and thinking and creativity and innovation, which there were many breakthroughs for them in the room, into their AI world, right? And into their computer world, where they then operationalize and executionalize the strategy and the high level innovation that they planned all together with their Legos playing hands on.
So they strategize through play,
Hmm.
problem solve through play.
Hmm.
Um, they generate creative ideas through play. And so that facilitates that human connection that then enables the spark to come up with new, fresh ideas to either problem solve or find the right strategy, find the right approach, and most importantly, bring people together in that process.
You said it beautifully. That's exactly right. I think there's the connection through collaboration and through thinking together and through building together is fascinating to see. I've done quite a few at this point, and every time I'm moved almost. So it's a basic human need, and it's a basic human talent that when we come together and build together and create together, something just beautiful happens.